Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting interesting people, key issues, and significant events in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. I have a t-shirt at home that says I helped build the 90,001st home in the world for Habitat for Humanity. That home was in Gary, Indiana. With us today on Lakeshore Focus is Dan Klein, the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity of Northwest Indiana. I think we're going to talk about housing today. Are you good with that?
I'm fine.
Okay, so we'll probably talk a little bit more about Habitat, but I want to really kind of talk about some concepts with housing, because you used to be the mayor of Crown Point.
I was.
Okay, for how long?
It was a 4-year term, Keith.
Okay, and you've been out of that for how many years?
About 6 years now.
Okay, and you've been with Habitat how long?
About 5 years.
Okay, are you like a lifelong Northwest Indiana guy?
I am. I've lived in Crown Point my whole life and worked in Chicago quite a few years and always chose to stay local here, and it was such a great community and just a hometown kind of place.
What'd you do in Chicago? I don't even know that.
I retired from AT&T as a service executive downtown. I had 24 years service there when I left.
Really? Okay. I did not know that about you, and I know a few other AT&T people. We'll have to talk about that at some point later. Let's talk a little bit about housing here in our region, and I know this probably applies just about any place. These concepts. There's a lot of people who just can't afford to buy a house. Why is that?
I think it really has to do with the fact that their income isn't what it needs to be from a building up a mass of money to make a down payment. Just the lifestyle. Some people have always rented and know nothing different than that. So it's interesting to find the different groups of people that are in their own enclave, if you will, that just have never thought that far, have never experienced the American dream.
Is there anything wrong with just renting?
There is not. In fact, we talk to people often that just love the fact that they have no responsibility and they can pick the phone up and call the landlord and when they have a problem.
And hope that he or she shows up, right?
Good points.
So for some people, that is probably just a good place to be in renting.
It is, depending on the size of your family and what your lifestyle is.
Where did this whole thing come about? And I've heard this my whole life too. And you have, the American dream is to own a home. Where did that come from? Do you have any idea?
I don't. I just know that when I was little, many years ago, that my family, I was one of 5 children, and my parents made a big stretch. My mom always told me to buy this old farmhouse that was out in the country, and they made it work, and raised us and 5 kids, and bettered themselves by doing that. And that's just maybe what was instilled in their mind. And
you got the message probably all the time, Dan, when you grow up, you need to buy a house, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You'll have your own home someday, and you can do with it what you want.
That's interesting. In America, it's like you own this property, so it's yours, and you do whatever you want with your property because it's yours, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So did your parents help you get into your first house?
You know what? I believe they did. We needed some more money for a down payment, and they floated us a loan for that. So we were very fortunate at the time because they didn't have that much money to start out with.
So it's interesting. We talk about this concept of you and I, and a lot of people come up with this culture of, we were in a place that our parents owned, and so our parents expect us, and they even help us get into these houses. But there are people who don't come up that way, that don't have that experience. So what brings them at some point, as you've seen, to all of a sudden want to say, I think I'd like to have a home?
In the Habitat world, we find people that have rented their whole life, and there's 5 people in this 2-bedroom apartment. And the apartment is not well cared for. It's more of a slum than it would be an apartment, but they have the initiative to want to do something different. And so when we come across them from a Habitat perspective, we have something for them. We can offer them something to change their lifestyle, but at the same time, they have to form a partnership with us to make it happen.
Give me an example, without using names, of course, of a family that has come to that realization that they really would like to own their own home. Because I know you guys interview people, they have to apply for a Habitat home, so you hear these stories quite often.
Correct. I'll use one of the houses that we just placed a family in East Chicago. And it was a single mom. I want to say there were 4 children, 3 or 4 children. And she had a job, had an income. And she heard about us. One of our flyers must have hit she must have seen it in the grocery store that we're having an information session. So she attended it and started the process with us. She filled out the application and she had the income. She wanted to form a partnership, and she had a need for adequate housing. And those are the 3 requirements from a Habitat perspective. So we sat down with her and we walked her through the process. And part of what we do is we educate people, because in her case, she was in a rental unit. Mm-hmm. And
probably had never been
a homeowner. For generations. Their families had never owned houses. So part of our process is we put them through what we call Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace class, which is 10, 12 weeks long. And we educate them on do's and don'ts, and it's really a Finance 101 class, if you will. The interesting thing about this individual was, from the time they started with us till she closed on her house, she raised her credit score 100 points.
Wow.
Which was fantastic. She got it. She realized credit is, everything hinges on your credit. So she's done a great job. In fact, she is really going to be our first Habitat family that will have an automatic deduction from our checking account every month into her mortgage payment from her account into our checking account.
Well, what do you think happened that made her think, I really ought to consider buying a place or getting into a place I own rather than rent?
I think in her case, Keith, it was the fact that she lived in an apartment building that had lots of issues, and this was a high-rise building. Okay. And she just was always having problems because she was on the bottom. So as we all know, water runs downhill, and so she was getting the brunt of many people's issues.
Water and a number of other things we know run downhill, right? So,
True.
So at some point she's like, this is not what I want for my family. I want something better. And so she came to the information session, which it sounds like are really good. When you have people, how many people show up to these information sessions?
It varies. It depends if we run them through a church or a school, or if we just have a general one where we'll put notices up in grocery stores and different agencies. I think the last one we had a month ago, we had probably about 15 people at each session. We had had it for 2 nights.
Does that represent like 8, 10 families, 15 people? Because there'll be a few single parents.
Correct.
And some couples.
About 10 families.
Okay. And so when you do this, out of that 10 families, how many do you see really show a serious interest in applying?
Not as many as I'd like to see.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do they walk out of there and not want to do something with you guys?
I think the follow-through is just lacking with a lot of people, and I think maybe they give up. They don't think it's for real. Yeah. They don't think that what we've told them is something that's really going to happen. Yeah. And so we'll follow up and make a phone call to try and talk with them and say, hey, we're waiting for this application or whatever it is that they would need to get us. That's the only thing I can imagine, because I'm disappointed with how many people don't send things back.
It's the age-old question I'm probably asking, like a restaurant owner or retailer, like, why don't people buy at your store? Why don't they shop at your place, or eat at your restaurant? It's kind of hard to know, but at least in this situation, you're saying sometimes that follow-up is really not there. So you guys are always looking for families then?
Absolutely. In fact, we are working on our 2014 build schedule right now, and we're looking for we're going to build 7 to 8 homes next year, which is pretty aggressive for us. And so we're looking for families for those homes.
Okay. Give us a little perspective on how many homes you guys have built, and you're doing Lake County only, correct?
That is correct. We are just Lake County, and we are in our 58th, working on our 58th house right now for Habitat of Northwest Indiana. In the state of Indiana, all the habitats make up the 7th largest state in all of the habitat, affiliates in the United States. So we're number 7 out of all the United States.
So how many homes does that mean in Indiana?
Next year we're going to hit our 5,000th home in Indiana.
Wow. So when I talked about my T-shirt, which I think I earned back in 2002 or something, they were building the 90,000th home. I've kidded with a couple people from Habitat for Humanity, like, I wonder where the 89,999th one was built and the 90,000th, but we had the 90,000th and first in Gary. So I'm thinking I saw something, the 120, 130,000. I mean, got to be up in that number.
Easily, Keith, easily. And that doesn't count the homes that we build overseas, because every Habitat affiliate ties to an overseas affiliate, and so far we've helped build 60-some homes in Haiti and places like that.
Give us the Cliff Note version of how Habitat really works for those who, I think Habitat's known by a lot of, do you think it's generally known how Habitat works?
You know what, it's not known as well as I thought it would be, because most people think that we give houses to people, and that's the farthest from the truth. We identify a family, we have them qualify for the home, and if they're interested in forming a partnership, then we'll put them through financial training classes, as I mentioned earlier, as well as some construction classes, and they work to a total of 300 hours of sweat equity on their home or another Habitat project. And at the end of all that, when the house is done, we have a closing where the house sells from Habitat to their name, and they are at that point the owners of the house. They receive that house, or they buy that house with a 0% interest rate. So when it's all done and over, they will pay us a mortgage payment that is just principal, taxes, and insurance, and it's normally around $500 a month.
Do you stand as a lien holder on the house?
We do.
Okay.
We hold the mortgage.
So they have to be a partner with you. They have to put some sweat equity into this thing. They have to get some education, and there's no down payment, correct?
There is no down payment.
Okay. So it's all based on what they can afford.
Correct. And with the 0% interest rate, if you will, the mortgage will be 20 to 25 years, maybe 30, but most of them are in the 20 to 25 year range.
Okay. One of the problems that I saw back when I was working with Habitat a number of years ago was because the tax rate was so high, and I'll kind of give a scenario here and hear your reaction to it, because I think this applies to a lot of our urban communities. The taxes on a house could easily be, on a house when it was done, might be a $100,000 home. The taxes on it might be $400 a month, might be $300 a month. And you add $100 in insurance onto that, and then a payment of $400 or $500, all of a sudden you're at $1,000. Is that kind of a common scenario for?
I think it used to be before we had the 1% tax cap, but that 1% tax cap was a godsend for low-income people, because right now they're guaranteed if the house is $100,000, their bill's going to be $1,000 a year basically, and that helps keep the rate low. In fact, the mortgage payment is right around $500, and that's with the taxes and the insurance and the principal payment.
Okay, so they're usually around $500, $500 or
Yes.
$600, that kind of thing. So the taxes on these houses are running?
They run about $100 a month.
Okay, so do they get a tax break for that? I mean, the homestead credit, right?
The same thing you and I would get, but
Okay.
nothing more than that.
Okay.
So when we build a home or a community, we're putting houses on a tax roll. In fact, we did one in Lowell last year. We're doing another one this year. And so we're going to generate, just in taxes, about $1,200 per house per year for the town of Lowell.
Okay. I'm going to shift a minute and talk about kind of mixed-use housing and this trend to blend housing in communities. And being a former mayor, I know you faced this, and Crown Point's a very, what considered to be affluent community. How do you deal in a Crown Point and a Valpo and a Sherrillville with the need for affordable housing in those communities?
Well, I think in Crown Point there were subdivisions of lower priced houses. And I guess the example I would use is a small national home. In fact, it's the first house we bought was about a 900 square foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. And we went in and we fixed it up, and we increased the value of the house. I think a lot of communities have homes like that, but with the building going on in Northwest Indiana, more of the building has been on the upper end of pricing, and people are looking to continually better a community. As far as mixed housing is concerned, I know in Crown Point when I was mayor, we approved this on North Main Street. It was businesses on the retail on the bottom, second floor was businesses, third floor was residential.
And that was a change in zoning.
That was very much so.
So when people talk about mixed-use housing, I mean, I think a lot of times people say, well, you're going to have a really expensive house, and next door is going to be a little $70,000 house, and so forth. Mixed use can also be, there's a subdivision or a group of houses that can have more of a moderate value. Is that true? Does that work?
Absolutely. In fact, you're seeing in some areas where in the older parts of, and I'll use Crown Point for instance, where on Court Street there is some houses torn down and a brand new one put up, and these were smaller homes, but you have the small with the large, and you have a mixture there of sizes and values. I don't think that happens as often as we would like, but again, you're mixing up the income levels, and I think that's good for people in regards to everybody has to play together in the same sandbox, if you will.
I would see that too. It kind of goes back to the old concept of helping your neighbor. You might be in a better position to help somebody who's really got some issues, but if everybody around you's got a lot of money, they may need help, but it probably is a different kind of problem, right?
Yes, absolutely. You don't know in some instances, and with today's communities, people aren't as friendly, I think, as they were 30 years ago. I mean, you knew who your neighbor was, you interacted with them. People are more, they're busier nowadays, and so they're all over the place, and things they have to do and places they have to take the kids.
Let me come back to Habitat. The backbone, I believe, of Habitat is your volunteers, is the people who come in and put their time in. It's probably your donors too, but how are your volunteers still a good solid core? You still have an easy time finding volunteers, hard time finding volunteers?
You know what, it depends on the time of year, I think. We were at a point where people, once we set our build schedule, people would schedule their vacations to be able to take time to help us. Because of our increase in housing, we went from 2 houses last year to 6 this year, and we're going to be at 7 next year. It's sometimes harder to find people because now we're requiring more and more volunteers to work on a house. And an average work day on a house is about 15 to 20 volunteers, and we build on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So we're looking at 15 to 20 per day of those 3 days, and we usually take 12 build days, so 4 weeks in a row, and we're pretty close to being done with it.
Kind of a month in terms of overall time. I still remember, I think the guy on our house was, the supervisor was named Wally or something, so.
Correct. Well, Wally used to be our construction manager, and he's since retired, but a great guy, and the volunteers love interacting with other people they've never met before, and again, working with the homeowner in a lot of cases to help them and get to know them.
Now you've got a resale shop that really helps fund what you do, or is a big piece.
Absolutely. It's called the Habitat Restore. We're up on Ridge Road right next to the Griffith Menards, and the Restore has just taken off tremendously. In fact, it covers the overhead cost of our affiliates, so that when people give us a donation, that donation goes 100% to somebody's house.
So what can I find in the store? I've been in there, but I'm going to let you tell them.
We have everything but clothes. So I know that I saw today as I walked through for a meeting I was at there, a bird bath that somebody had made. It's sort of an artsy kind of bird bath. We got couches and chairs in, brand new house wrap that was donated through a contractor. We had 3 semi-loads of building products come in that somebody had, and they thought, I need to get rid of them to make space for everything else, and they sent them to us, and we had brand new French doors. I mean, you just never know what you're going to get.
So the point is, if somebody's working on a project, redoing their house or something, they ought to just bring all their extra stuff over to you after they're done.
Absolutely. We'll take furniture, appliances, sinks, whatever they might have, toilets. We're probably the best used toilet salesperson in Northwest Indiana.
I didn't think of you as a used toilet salesman, but are you having fun doing what you're doing?
You know what? It's really rewarding from the standpoint that, and I use the lady who had their credit score go up 100 points. It was neat to be part of that, and neat to see that something we put in place helped her. And we're finding more and more of this as we're ramping up production. We're finding that we're touching more and more people. In fact, I'm getting to the point where I'm not remembering everybody's name because there's getting to be so many of them, but it's neat to be part of that, Keith.
So we're down to really just last couple of seconds. What does our community need to be doing to help you?
You know what, if you have some spare time, please call us. We're always looking for volunteers. If you have 10 spare dollars, call us. We'll take that from you as well. And then if you're remodeling or cleaning out your closets, please call us. We'll come pick up what items you have that you can donate to us.
Because this really makes a difference in the lives of a family.
Absolutely. You can't believe how much it does.
And one of your recommendations would be come and see one of your closings ceremonies?
Absolutely. We've got several coming up. They'll be posted on the website.
Okay, and people can really see how that touches folks.
Absolutely. It's a great movement.
Thanks for being here and for all the good you do here in Northwest Indiana and all the volunteers too.
Great. Keith, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. One of the basic needs of life is a place to stay. It's the simple concept that states every human being on the face of the planet must have food, clothing, and shelter. Food is clearly first. Without it, you cannot live. Our bodies require something to eat and drink to attain and remain healthy. Clothing is second. Many of us mistake the need for clothing as an issue of decency, meaning lack of clothing would create a society of moral depravity or immodest behavior. Actually, clothing is much more about protecting our bodies from the elements and other forms of harm. Finally, we are at housing, a place to park our bodies. A place to live is a place to eat, care for self, rest, and be safe. Without a location to aid in these daily functions of life, we would struggle and perhaps perish. The American culture has added a slightly different twist to this idea of housing. Many Americans believe that ownership of place is very important. Holding title to property gives one a sense of pride and responsibility. It bolsters the concept of self-sufficiency and independence, allowing a person to navigate toward an individual destiny. Whether you believe in the basic need for it or the American philosophy, housing or a place to live is essential. Today we find communities trying to revise and promote a model that provides mixed-use housing. We realize that putting all of one type of person or family in one location contributes to ostracism, bias, stereotyping, segregation, miscommunication, and more. We have built enclaves where the haves live in one place and the have-nots live in another, and those who have no place to go live in between. My daughter has moved to a different neighborhood in Chicago. Recently, she and I were walking down the street and she said, "Don't you love my neighborhood? Every kind of person lives here." She gets it. Many of the rest of our citizens don't. We must learn to live together, which means that everyone and every kind of person must have a place to stay. Our society must find ways to make housing opportunities available for all people. Yes, there are people who struggle, but we would not want to see any of them starve or run naked through the streets. Housing is that third need for everyone, not just part of us. Every week I end the show with a thank you and a message to email us. I know most of you have email. Drop me a note, even if it's just to say you are alive and watching, or you like my tie, or you thought my guest was good looking. It's great to know. So here goes. Email us at focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or reach us through our website, which is on your screen. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.